Hello and welcome to a new video all about the DP-900, which sounds like I'm going to try and sell you a new fancy vacuum cleaner, but I'm not. The DP-900 is the Microsoft exam for Azure Data Fundamentals. I took the exam recently and passed, which is great, so I thought I would put together a quick overview on the exam and just cover how you can prepare for the exam using Microsoft Learn. I've recently blogged a revision guide as well, and I'll put a link to that in the comments below, so please check that out. We're going to start by looking at the exam main page over on Microsoft.com, and this is where we'll find an overview of the exam, what the target audience is, and also they'll put up notices such as forthcoming updates that may be happening to the exam. So we can see here there's going to be some updates on October the 22nd of this year. And according to this page, candidates who are looking to sit the exam should have foundational knowledge of core data concepts and how they are implemented using Microsoft Azure Data Services. It is a fundamentals exam level, and what I will say straight away is that whilst it's not too technically in depth, having done the exam, I did find it very broad in subject material. And for sure, there's a lot of data services in Microsoft Azure, and of course the concepts. So it says here that candidates should be familiar with concepts of relational and non-relational data and different types of data workloads, such as transactional or analytical, or OLTP or OLAP as we refer to them. And if we scroll a bit further down, we can actually see, well, here's where you can schedule the exam, but we've actually got the skills measured. So this is the actual content that's going to be covered in the exam, and we actually get a question weighting in terms of percentage for each of the sections. And that means, for example, describing core data concepts, 15 to 20% of the questions in the exam are going to come from that section. And then what we have as well, the other sections describe how to work with relational data on Azure, describe how to work with non-relational data on Azure, and describe an analytics workload, again, on Microsoft Azure. And like any exam, you may be familiar with some of these areas already. If you've been working with something like SQL Server, for example, the data concepts and relational data are perhaps areas that you're very comfortable with. The non-relational, however, might be sort of fairly new. So, there'll be some extra attention to study in that area. And the next step, what we'll do is actually take a look at this skills outline, which details the exam sections even more, and that's going to tell us exactly what is covered. So we'll do that next. So here we are in the skills outline document for the DP-900 exam. This is much more of an in-depth exam guide and what we should base our studying and preparation on. There's a couple of notes just to mention. The following list is not definitive or exhaustive, and in most cases the exams do not cover preview features. So the only content that will be in the exam when it comes to Azure services and things, they have to be in general availability. So the four sections that we mentioned very briefly before, now we get a breakdown of what the exam entails. So for our first one, which was describe core data concepts, now we have some breakdowns. So there's a section here, describe types of core data workloads. What's batch data? What's streaming data? What's the difference between batch and streaming data? And as well describe the characteristics of relational data. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I just wanted to sort of give a quick overview. And one thing I'll mention right from the top here is that this is kind of an approach that I use to study the exam, and what I would recommend is that for these type of items, describe batch data, streaming data, make sure that you know the definition of it, what it is, what it does. What type of scenario would you use batch data? For example, if you were working on a schedule, if you were working with real time, then you'd use streaming data instead, and that's how they differentiate. This is kind of the sort of pattern that I would use for each of these. In the next section, we have describe data analytics core concepts, If we take a look here, describe analytics techniques. Again, we've got descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive, etc., etc. So again, what do they mean? What are they? And in what scenario would you use descriptive analytics over predictive analytics, for example? It's that sort of understanding that the exam is looking for. Again, it's not too technically in depth, but it's definitely very broad in subject material. So going on to the next section, relational data on Azure. What we have here is now we're going to start looking at some of the services. So before then, we've got describe relational data workloads. Very, very high level. If you've been using databases, describe relational data structures, tables, indexes, and views. Then we get into the services that are on the platform. So right from the top here, we've got describe and compare PaaS, IaaS, and SaaS delivery models. So what are they? What do they mean? And then for services, for relational Azure data services, we have Azure SQL Database, Synapse Analytics, SQL Server on Azure virtual machines. We've got the open source databases that you can run as a managed service in Azure, and describe Azure SQL managed instances as well. So if you're familiar with using these services, great. If not, then you're going to sort of get into them, understand what they are and how to use them. Definitely for this next section, identify basic management tasks for these relational data services. We've got how you would provision them, describe methods for deployment, security, identifying connectivity issues, and identifying query tools. So here we have things like SQL Server Management Studio. So if you've been using that, great. You might not be that familiar with using Azure Data Studio, but you should be because it's a fantastic tool. So what we will see is shortly how we can use Microsoft Learn to get hands-on with these things as well. And again, like we've mentioned about the more concept items as well, understanding what type of scenario where you would use Azure SQL Database, what type of scenario where you would use Azure SQL Managed Instance. Again, it's quite sort of high level. And then before we get to the non-relational pieces, a couple of other bits here, how you would query relational data on the open source ones, so using something like Azure Data Studio perhaps, and comparing DDL versus DML. So what do they mean? Then finally on this section, I did just want to cover very, very quickly. At the very beginning of the exam, I said that the main page would include what updates could be forthcoming. So for example, the exam is going to be updated on the 22nd of October. In the skills outline, you'll see the updates that will be occurring. So in here, we've got nothing sort of too significant. So that most of it seems to be changes in terminology. We have a bit here that's been taken out, describe Azure SQL Managed Instance, but that's actually been moved to a section here, describe Azure SQL Database Services, that includes them all. So not really too much change in content, but that can happen. So if you are looking to sit the exam, definitely take a look at that page, because if there's significant changes coming and you're thinking of doing the exam sort of past that date, then you may need to learn some other material. So now that that's covered, we'll take a look at how you can prepare for this exam using the Microsoft Learn platform. So one of the great things about learning technologies that are based in the cloud is the amount of learning material that is out there from the different cloud platform providers. And as I'm from Yorkshire, there's nothing better than actually not having to pay for something. So in this case, enter Microsoft Learn. If you've not used this platform before, check it out. You just need a Microsoft account, and there is a stack of learning content out there for lots of different technologies. In fact, I'll probably do a video on its own about the platform, but for now, we're going to focus on the learning material for this particular exam, the DP-900. And from the main page, we can just scroll down just past the skills measured, and we get to the exam preparation section. So we can have instructor led, which is paid for, again from Yorkshire, not today. but we have the free preparation. And this is where we can go into Microsoft Learn. So remember the 4 sections for this particular exam. What we have here is a learning path that is set up for each one. So we've got the core data concepts, relational data, non-relational data, and the analytics. I'm just going to open the Explore Core Data Concepts learning path to see how that's broken down. And in here, we can see that the learning path is actually broken down into different modules. So for the Explore Core Data Concepts, we have 5 different modules, and that's going to take you an hour and 48 minutes to get through, which is very, very precise. And you do get XP points for completing each module, which is very console-y, but why not? Why not? It's a good idea, I think. And each of these modules is then further broken down into units. So we can just open this one up, for example, and we can see in here the different units that are available to do, the learning objectives. And for each of these modules, when you go through the units, you get a knowledge check with some questions. There'll be 3 or so normally, and a summary. So for example, let's just have a look at data solutions. We'll have a quick sort of scan through. There's a lot of information in here. It's a really, really good learning resource. So just looking at this one, what is data? We go through some JSON, graph database, how data is defined and stored, describing different data processing solutions. So transactional, we've mentioned OLTP a few times. What is an analytical system? So again, this is referring to the exam skills measured that we went through in the skills outline documents. And we've got bits on data ingestion as well, so we mentioned that. Data querying, data visualization. So there's lots of things that we need to look into, and definitely try and absorb all of this information as we go through. The one thing that I will add is not to skip the summary. So the summary, tempting to sort of skip over it because that's just going to be some sort of high level, this is what we've learned how to, for example, how data is defined and stored. But there's learn more links. And what I found is that the sort of raw content on Microsoft Learn, not sure if it's enough to get through the exam. What I would recommend is that you go through the further learning links, click those, and definitely take a look at that. It's definitely worthwhile as part of your studying to go through these extra links and see what's in there. And again, what I will say, and I mentioned it very early on, is that I did put together a revision guide which is based on the skills outline that has links to either Microsoft Learn or third-party web pages for extra material that you can take a look at. So definitely check that out. And the final thing I wanted to look at is getting hands-on with Microsoft Learn. And for that, I'll just jump into a module where we get to actually do something in Azure. So here we are in the deploying and provisioning relational data offerings in Azure module that's part of the Relational Data Services learning path. And actually, if we scroll down here to see that the units that are in there, just above summary, we have an exercise where we will provision Azure Relational Database Services. So if I click into that and go in, what we've got here is an Azure Sandbox, which is a completely free learning environment. For this, you need an existing Azure account, so if you've not got one, you'll need to sign up. And basically, this is going to give you access to Azure resources for absolutely nothing. Go Yorkshire. So you can follow the exercise that's set out below, and you can actually get hands-on with doing something in the cloud. This is great, and learn by doing is the current motto. So that's this is a perfect opportunity to get your hands dirty, so to speak. So I've already activated my sandbox. Normally you would have to sign in and verify. Then you can choose a database solution that you want to base the exercise on. Here I've gone for Azure Database for MySQL, why not? And then we can scroll down. We'll just have a quick look at what we need to do for the exercise. Sign into the Azure portal. Make sure that you're using the same account that you activated the sandbox with, and then you can set up the service with their specifications that they have here. So just quickly, I'm currently signed in and Microsoft Learn Sandbox has been enabled. So this is going to give me a completely free of charge learning environment where I can set up my Azure resources and get some experience in that. This, for me, is what sets Microsoft Learn apart. It's a fantastic learning platform, lots of topics in there, and with the sandbox you get this crucial actual experience at using the different services. And that's really it for this video. If you're going to do the exam, good luck. Please post any comments below. Hit like if you thought the video was useful. I will be posting more videos that actually relate to some of the study points. And of course, like every other YouTube out there says, please subscribe to my channel and I will see you next time.